Chapter 24. The most important thing is not to feel anymore. Harry rose heavily from the sofa. It was already a few hours Hermione was gone. His mind had been somehow blurry and foggy lately, but it was clear now. After more than a month, finally, it was clear. He wasn't tormented by emotions any longer. He had taken a decision, and he knew it was the right one. That confidence had cancelled the confusion clouding his mind for so long. He felt tired, that much was true. Since his memory had started to get back, he hadn't been able to sleep, persecuted by it. There were still many details that surely were missing, but at least he had been able to remember about Ginny and Lily. And it was the memory of them that triggered at first his decision. He walked into the kitchen, opened the drawer, and took what he needed. Then he headed for the bathroom. He didn't look about him. He was as if nothing was surrounding him. He didn't look at the pictures on the wall. He didn't see the children's drawing. He didn't linger in idle remembrances. There was only his motive. Once in the bathroom, he opened the tap to fill the bathtub. While waiting, listening to the hot water cascading, he rested his hands on the sink and looked at himself in the mirror. He couldn't read any expression on his face, and likely it was because there weren't any thoughts swirling in his head. There was only emptiness. Probably it should have been filled with memories, regrets, hopes, and images of any kind. Maybe fear too? There should surely have been turmoil, but there was nothing. A deep quietness. When the bathtub was full, he undressed and immersed himself in the hot water. He reclined his head, enjoying the warmth and that much longed for blissful nothing in his mind. He was wary of emotions. He didn't wish for any. That's why he was doing what he was about to do. He was wary of pain, anger, sorrow, and he was wary to inflict the same on others. Now, everybody could have finally been happy without his obnoxious presence that could only bring misery in the life of the people he cared most. And finally, he could have been serene. He observed the shiny blade left on the tub's edge and studied for a moment. There had been ponderation on how to do this. He didn't wish for pain. He just wanted to slumber into nothingness like when falling asleep. And, for some reasons, this seemed appropriated. He wasn't sure why. Maybe because it would have come gradually, or maybe because it almost seemed like a purification of body. He didn't know for certain, but it seemed appropriated. He rose his left arm from the water and observed the scar left when Peter Pettigrew had taken his blood. It had been used to give a body to evil. Now it was despair to remove an evil from his family. Maybe that's why it was appropriated. He pressed the tip of the blade on the top of his scar, a long vertical line on his forearm. The metal was cold against the skin, heated by the water. He wasn't scared or hesitant, not at all. It wasn't like when 17. He had needed a lot of courage to walk toward that, to say goodbye to life. It was dear to him back then. But he was young, and life for young people is much more valuable. Or maybe it was just a regret of not having had the chance to love fully and be loved back. He had tried it now. He knew what it meant, the torments that brings, and he wasn't sorry to leave everything behind. He pressed the blade deeper in his skin until he felt it lashing. It wasn't that painful. He had endured worse. He moved the blade down, tracing the scar. When he got to the bottom of it, just to make sure everything was going to proceed smoothly, he drew another parallel cut and another one on the other side. While tracing this last line, he remembered in a flash about a promise made to Ginny when she was pregnant with Sunrise about doing his best not to do what he was doing. He had to take care of his children, she had said. Oh well, Molly and Arthur could do that for the boys. Dad could take care of Sunrise. They would have been fine, so much better than with a father with a shattered mind as his was. And he had indeed tried his best. It was a long time already he was struggling against this, a maddening period full of bitterness and agony. But he had not the strength to keep on trying. No, there wasn't any point to it. Ginny couldn't know what she was asking when she made him promise, otherwise she wouldn't have done it. Once finished, he dropped the knife on the floor that fell with a clatter. He stared briefly at the 3 red lines on his forearm, one for him, one for Lily, and one for Ginny. Blood was dripping already, forming red swirl in the water. He lowered his arm under the surface that tinged immediately with a shade of pink. He reclined his head again, closing his eyes. Now he only ought to wait. A fleeting thought crossed his mind, and he opened an eye, reflecting a moment on it. Perhaps he should leave a note. For the boys, for Hermione, for the Weasley, for Ron. But what could have written if not an apology to have ruined their lives? No, it was better not. He was removing himself from their sight. That was enough. He closed his eye and relaxed. Now he was going to find out if the white place was indeed real. He hoped so. He remembered very well how nice it was. But he wasn't too fussy about it. It would have been pleasant to return then again. But even if not, it was fine anyway. The most important thing was not to feel anymore. And death could provide that well enough, thankfully. It had been so difficult to live, so many unconquerable struggles, a battle after another in an endless succession. He was glad to have it finally over. And the last clear question popped in his head before everything became hazy. Is it the same for everybody? Or has it been so difficult only for me? Chapter 25. The Shape of Heaven. His mind was drifting away, some elusive blurry thoughts floating lazily, but they were fast losing their shape, becoming more and more only colors, less and less distinguishable. The little noises around him, the swish of the water, some drops falling from the tap, were fast losing their contour too, becoming more and more muddled and less audible. Eyes closed, he could see the pitch black behind his eyelids. His breathing was so shallow now, it was only a pleasant lullaby, accompanying him in the descent. Then, slowly, everything began to turn off. Consciousness left him, and when it did, it was nothing. It lasted for a bit, surrounding him, but when he was starting to think that this was death, a dreary nothing, he perceived some light. It came up gradually, behind his eyelids, getting very bright with every passing instant. When it became so bright, he could ignore it no longer. He decided to open his eyes to discern the source of it. He was lying on a white floor, nor cold nor hot, enfolded in whiteness. He sat up and looked about him and at himself. He was naked, but dry and comfortable. No trace of water or blood. He didn't feel any shivers of cold nor waves of heat. The temperature was just perfect. It was the white place, exactly as he remembered it. The silence so complete, it deafened, and the white so pure, it blinded. There wasn't any strange creature whining this time. He was alone. He stood up, undecided on what to do. As he was thinking that he would have liked some clothes, he spotted behind him a white t-shirt and some jeans carefully folded on the floor. He was sure they weren't there before, but surprisingly, it didn't surprise him. There wasn't any underwear, nor socks, nor shoes. It didn't bother him so much. Actually, now that he reflected on it, being alone, he could very easily have done without clothes altogether. It didn't matter that much. But he wore them anyway, to have something to do, and looked about him again, wondering. There was nothing to be seen. He took a few steps. Everything seemed to stretch forever in the same whiteness. He walked for some time, randomly, but the landscape didn't change. The only thing barely visible was a thin line separating the floor from... what? Sky? A wall? He halted. The previous time, Dumbledore had appeared, talking to him as he had never done before. But now there wasn't anybody else beside him. He felt suddenly a bit lonely and wishing for some company. And, as with the clothes, the wish was barely sprouted that he saw two tiny spots appearing from far away. As they were getting closer, he perceived that one was taller than the other. They were holding hands. He smiled because he knew who they were, and he didn't have the time to realize he wasn't surprised at all that a joyous shriek echoed all around. "Daddy!" And his pet was flying in his wide open arms, ready to enfold her. She jumped with enthusiasm in it, throwing her childish arms around his neck. He lifted her, burying his face in her dark red hair, inhaling at the top of his lungs the characteristic smell of his child that for years he hadn't met anywhere, if not in his dreams. And there wasn't a violent emotion that would have marked an encounter of that kind in any other place, because they were in the white place now, and it was as though he had always known he would have found her there. He held her tightly, savoring the pure, supreme happiness that doesn't disrupt but only make one feel complete and serene. And there was only another person that couldn't make it perfectly so, just another piece missing that was now walking toward him. Holding Lily with one arm, he opened the other to embrace her. She was smiling sweetly and nestled up against him. "Hi, baby. I wasn't expecting you so soon," she said in a whisper, while he was kissing her head. And he knew then that the white place was indeed heaven, because heaven for him smelled of milk and biscuits, was made of a tingling thrill of delight, had red hair, freckles, and golden almond eyes, and they were both in his arms. He held them, incapable to speak, savoring that bliss, that peace after so much sorrow. He finally felt home, where he belonged, free of torments and fears and insecurities. His mind could finally be at rest, soothed and quietened by the joy of having the two loves of his life, thought to be lost forever, in his arms again. He kissed them repeatedly, unable to stop. Lily laughed gaily under the rain of kisses. "Your beard is long," she giggled. "It tickles." "I'm sorry, my precious," he said. They rubbed noses laughing, and he let her down, closing her tiny hand in his own, where it rested perfectly, because there it belonged. Ginny was under his arm, close to him. He kissed those soft lips he had dreamt of almost every night since she was gone. "I love you so much. I missed you so much," he murmured in her ear. With every step taken, all the whiteness began to mutate, developing slowly. It started coloring with a shade of green. Soon, he felt a soft and moist grass under his feet, and trees were visible not far off. Bushes with blooming colorful flowers were scattered here and there. The smell of summery dew met his nostrils. He was perfection. However, he was only barely aware of what was surrounding him, unable to concentrate his attention on anything else but on Ginny and Lily, who was chirping gaily about how happy she was to see him and recounting him how she met Grandma, her namesake, and how much she liked her. "You have to meet her one day," she concluded gaily. "I would love to," he replied, thinking about his parent waiting for him somewhere in what now was this beautiful garden and the possibility of finally getting to know them. Everybody was waiting for him there. The thought was soothing and cheerful at the same time. A cherry tree, like the one in Ron and Hermione's garden, appeared in front of them, and in a shrill of delight, Lily was running toward it, aiming at the lower branch to grasp the red shiny fruits. There was a wood bench, and he and Ginny sat on it watching her. He kept her hand in his own, and never felt so perfectly at ease as at that moment. Nothing could disturb his happiness now. No worries, no fear to lose them again. They were going to be with him forever. "We haven't got much time, I fear." "Of course." "Why?" he asked, grinning. "Because it is not your time yet." "It is. I'm here, don't you see?" She didn't answer, and observed him with a sad expression. Then she reached out for his face and caressed his cheek. He kissed her hand, and kissed again those lips, trying to conceal the gloom from her face. When their lips parted, she spoke. "I've seen you down there. I was very worried." "Did you?" he asked, surprised by this revelation. He shook his head. "I'm sorry then," he said, thinking to all he had done and would have preferred her not to see. And with a small smile, he added, "If I knew you were watching, I would have behaved better." And sobering again, "It doesn't matter now anyway. I'm here, and this is all it matters." "I don't think you're dead yet," she affirmed, staring searchingly at him. "If I'm not, I'll be very soon. I'm not going back. I cannot anyway. If you watch me, you know why. And it has been the best decision taken in years," he said, looking at Lily, who was now trying to climb the tree. "No, Harry. Possibly the worst. You cannot leave our kids alone. You are wrong in thinking they will be better without you. They need you. She paused a moment, looking down, and then to Lily, who was waving from the top of the lowest branch. He shook his head, smiling. They don't. They are better off without me. Ginny stared hard at him for some moment, reflecting on his words. You know, she said in the end, you have indeed a feeling guilty thing. Hermione is right. Harry burst out laughing. Did you watch every single tiny little thing? Unfortunately, yes, she replied primly, distancing slightly from his side. He grasped her firmly, forcing her back close to him. I'm sorry, he apologized again, kissing her behind the ear. But if you saw me, you know how distraught I was. I was either sickly, kind of punishing every woman because it wasn't you, or just pretending it was you. In every case, it was always the thought of you. I was always looking for you. I always wished so desperately it was you. He murmured, his forehead against her, brushing lightly his lip on her smooth skin. And Hermione, he sighed. I don't deserve to be called a friend. I've done nothing but hurting her. Hermione is a tough woman. She has always known what she was getting into, but she knows as well that you love her in your way and have no wish to hurt her. She must only learn to be contented of what you can offer her, which is anyway deep and intense. What you can do is to help her to understand it. She paused a moment, leaving the time for her center to sink in, and then continued. Our kids, though, they need a father. She gazed at Lily, still busy devouring cherries. Do you remember when Lupin insisted to accompany you in your search for the Horcrux, leaving Tonks behind? Do you remember? How did you react to it? Hermione told me of it. Harry didn't answer, surprised by her words. He remembered it quite well. He had protested against it quite angrily, convinced that the role of a father was to take care of his children, no matter what. But thinking it over with an adult mind, it was easier to sympathize with the scared, remorse Lupin, convinced his presence was only going to harm the yet unborn child. How difficult it was to follow the advice of his younger self, how many nuances a teenager couldn't comprehend. He stroked her hair gently while she continued. Sunrise deserves the love of a parent. She would fill the void exactly as you felt it. And you know, Albus, you are the center of his universe. And James, she sighed, he worries me very much too. He's taking a bad turn. He needs you as much as ever. Harry shook his head with a bitter smile. He doesn't, Ginny. You must have seen what happened. He hates me. And after a pause, looking at the cherry tree. And he is right. I failed to protect you. I left you alone. She took his face in her hands, locking his gaze with her own. It's not your fault, it's not. You have done all what you could and more. You always filled my life and the kids with happiness and love. Returning back, I would marry you 100 times over, despite how it ended, because every minute with you has been worth more than 10 years alone. She kissed him, smoothing his hair. And it doesn't hate you. It just needs a strong emotion to bear all what is too overwhelming to bear. You must take some steps toward him before these sentiments start to fester beyond repair. James feels everything too acutely for his own good. He broods and doesn't confide easily. He's very similar to you. Harry listened attentively, reflecting on her words. Everything made sense, and he was willing to take those steps. but the look on his face the last time they met made him doubt whether it was already too late. However, it sickened him the thought to return to all those struggles and challenges. Did he even have the choice to return? He couldn't help but hope to stay there forever. He shook his head. I don't want to go. I don't want to leave you ever again. And as he was speaking, the landscape around them changed once more. They were sitting on white fine sand. A warm sun was shining on their skin, and in front of them, endless on the horizon, a smooth blue greenish sea. Behind them stood a white house with a porch where a hammock was hung, a place similar to the one he had always dreamed about when fantasizing about moving with the whole family away. Lily, seeing the sea, was over the moon. Her floating summery dress had transformed in a bright pink swimsuit. She dipped her feet in the water, laughed in delight, and ran back to them. "Daddy, do you like my swimsuit?" she asked, inspecting it minutely. "It's my favorite," she affirmed in the end proudly. "You are very pretty," he complimented her. "Come on here." He gestured her to sit on his lap. He ran his fingers lovingly in her silky hair, warmed by the sun, and it felt so right to be able to do it once more. But there was something odd. The sun, that until a second before was shining brightly right on the top of their head, was moving fast now, too fast, toward the horizon. The bright light was starting to fade in a sunset. "Harry, I think you're about to go," Ginny said, serious, watching the sun about to disappear. Harry grew alarmed. "No!" he exclaimed. "Listen to me," she said, now eager but calmly. "You are going back, and you'll do your best to be happy. You'll do it for Sunrise as well as for James and Albus. You'll be strong for their sake." Harry started to shake his head, about to interrupt. The sun was going down and down, projecting long shadow behind them, but she put gently a hand on his mouth and didn't let him. "You will take care of our kids, because they need you, and me and Lily will be here waiting for you when your time will come. We will see each other again." Harry was speechless, panicking under the threat of going back, but the sun had disappeared under the horizon now, and only some rays of light were coloring the sky that was getting speedily dark. "I love you," she said, as stars were starting to be reflected in her eyes. "Hug the kids for me." But her voice was starting to be distorted, like if coming from afar. She kissed him, but he couldn't see her anymore. There was only the warmth of her lips on his own, lingering a moment and then disappear. As a last thing, he heard a childish voice coming from very far away. "Goodbye, Daddy!" And it was all gone, pitch black. His eyelids felt very heavy. With a huge effort, he opened them, and for a faltering, relieving moment, he thought he was still in the white place. A big, blurred white shadow was in front of him. He blinked a couple of times to focus. It wasn't a white place. It was only Ted, frowning and bustling around him. And like reemerging from water, his ears started to pick up voices and noises. "Thank God!" he heard somebody exclaim, followed by hysterical sobbing. It was Hermione, all disheveled, her face all splattered with blood, her arms striated by the same. She was kneeling beside the bathtub, crying violently, holding in one hand her wand and with the other clutching his arm, now healed. He wanted to say something consoling, but his body wasn't responding. He could only blink, and even that was hard to accomplish. He started to shudder. The water had become cold, and as he was getting back his senses, he perceived it. Ted was unscrewing the lid of a red bottle. He pulled it over to his face, pouring slowly the content between his parted lips. "Swallow it!" he ordered. And as most of the content was sliding on his chin, he entreated, "Come on, Harry, swallow it!" He gulped a drop of that warm, ferrous-tasting liquid, and Ted kept on pouring, and he kept on gulping down until the bottle was empty. The effort of drinking drained in him all energies, and when Ted took away the now empty bottle, Harry closed his eyes, exhausted, drifting straight away in nothingness again. It wasn't the same nothingness, though, not the nothingness of sleeping in death. He was simply sleeping in a deep slumber.